Well, the book will be out on December the 6th here in the United States, and they say that it will be in the stores in Canada on December the 8th. So this is a new genre for me. So I'm a historian. I'm someone who writes for my colleagues, for my students. Recently, I started to write for a broader audience, but I never wrote anything approaching a detective story, non-fiction thriller, and that's apparently is the genre of the new book. So the title is The Man with the Poison Gun, a Cold War spy story. And it is focused on the story of Bohdan Stashynsky, the person who, on the orders from Moscow, killed Stepan Bandera in October of 1959. And before that, he killed Lev Rebet, another leader of Ukrainian nationalism in immigration. Both assassinations were undertaken in Munich. The reason why I decided to revisit that story was that we now have this very new situation where we have access to some of the materials, CIA materials, on Stepan Bandera, and including on the CIA investigation into his assassination. Given the developments in Ukraine, and in particular unprecedented opening of the KGB archives, I was able to work with the personal file of the person who I believe was the handler of Stashinsky. We also have now publications of the short biographies of the people who were in charge of the KGB, including in the 1940s and 1950s, and we can establish names of people who were involved in the assassination. So at the end of the day, all of that, the availability of the new materials made it almost irresistible for me to plunge into this very new topic for me and try my skills in a new genre, and it will be up to my colleagues and broader readership to judge whether I succeeded or not. I liked writing it, and again, the idea is that you deal with something that not is just unknown. You deal with something that the entire state machine of more than one state was trying to conceal, was hiding. You deal in a situation where it's not just the government bodies try to withhold information and preclude you from using it, but other government bodies are producing all sorts of false stories and red herring and things like that, and trying to, first of all, find those documents and then figure out what is genuine, what is not genuine, and making a judgment on the basis of that kind of sources. That was a challenge, but it was really also a lot of fun working on that material, despite the tragedy, human and otherwise, of the story per se. Well, there is a lot of new materials, and I will not disclose everything new because probably viewers then will not be interested in buying the book. But I will tell you, for example, that one of the myths about assassination, about Bohdan Stashynsky, that is out there, is that it was the CIA made a deal with him. That's why he received a very relatively short term of imprisonment, 8 years, and served only 2/3 of it, and then allegedly underwent the plastic surgery and lives in the United States or something like that. Well, when you look at the CIA files, the first thing that surprises you is that the main report that is there in the CIA documents is dated the year 1974. And the report, April of 1974, and the report is written with the goal of assessing whether Stashinsky was actually a defector or he was a KGB plant. So the CIA in 1974 is still unsure who he was. And it's very clear from that report that they actually didn't have much to do with him after his release from prison. And more than that, he wanted to surrender to the Americans. He wanted to surrender to CIA. That's what happened. They interrogated him for 3 weeks. They couldn't figure out whether he was a bona fide defector or not. They didn't want to have anything in common with him, and they dumped him on the Germans, on the West Germans. And it were the West Germans who then conducted an investigation and decided that actually what he was saying was true. So that was the first surprise that I had, gaining access to the CIA materials. But there is more of all sorts of interesting things, including, as I told you, some materials from the KGB archives, including the personal file of the handler. I conducted an interview, telephone interview, with the former head of the South African secret police, who confirmed that Stashinsky was in that country in the 1970s. An assistant of mine worked in the archives, parish archives in the suburb of Berlin, confirming that indeed Stashinsky's son was buried there in 1961. So there is a lot of, again, the basic story we know from the trial that took place in 1962, but there is a lot of new materials and new twist and new understanding actually of what happened. And it's quite possible that Stashinsky is still around. He was born in November of 1931, so that would make him now, 85 years old. The last years of Bandera's life, in terms of his cooperation with the different intelligence services, from British to American to West German. So these things were basically unknown or little known, and that became a very important part when they started to look who could kill Bandera. So one day before the meeting, before killing, he had a meeting with the representatives of the West German intelligence. They were discussing the fate of the group that was sent to Soviet Ukraine. Again, those were the members of the Bandera organization, but it was the German intelligence who helped and assisted with all this process. So some elements maybe of Bandera's personal life, because again that also became an issue once they were looking into possible causes for what happened, because some influential people, including his personal security, was saying, for example, that he probably committed suicide over the younger woman. So there will be some elements, but I don't think that anything in that book will change general perception of Bandera either one way or another. So really, the focus is on the assassin, and the basic storyline there is the Soviet regime, the repressive Soviet regime that actually breaks someone as young as 19 years old and forces him to spy on his own family and spy on his own people, and that person internalized some of the elements of this public kind of a discourse. It's almost Stockholm syndrome, but eventually rebels against that. So we won't know what happened to Bandera if at the end of the day Stashinsky wouldn't defect and wouldn't talk about that. So that trajectory is really something that is at the center of the narrative. I was inspired, and I originally actually was trying, in a way, follow some of the ways how those things are done, and then I realized that I can't do that, and not just that I can't do that, but the material that I have, the genre that I am chosen, which is nonfiction, really doesn't fit very well the fiction thriller But the title of the book, The Man with the Poison Gun, is taken certainly from the Ian Fleming's last James Bond novel, The Man with the Golden Gun. And in fact, Ian Fleming was some of the elements of that novel came directly from Stashinsky's trial. So the novel is opened with the opening scene is when Bond is trying to kill his boss with basically what became known as Stashinsky gun, with the poison gun. And before he is trying to do that, his boss mentions to him 2 killings in Munich with fictional names, but it's clearly that it is based on the story of the killing of Bandera and Rebet. So in a sense, there is a very direct connection between the story that I tell and the iconic image of James Bond and the spy thrillers of the Cold War. So there is influence in that way. Right, yeah, the blurbs were very positive. I was very pleased with that. And they now started publishing first review in Britain. So I guess we'll see what the reaction of the readership will be. If at the end the jury that is out there will say, okay, you're wasting your time, I certainly will take this seriously. If the reaction will be, wow, you really was able to do something interesting, then I take that into account as well. So I'm just waiting to see what happens. That's also a big question. And again, the only thing that I can say, I am very conservative in a way in terms of departing from what my main work has been. If you can look at Alex Motyl, a really first-class political scientist who is writing fiction and who is an artist. So I feel very humble compared to him. So I think that it's okay to try yourself in different areas and see what happens.